Losing a job can be devastating. Financially, yes, but also emotionally. Today, some help in dealing with job loss and finding a new and possibly better one. Welcome to Weekend Connection. My name is Mike Dyes. Now, let's get connected. It seems that the days of working at the same job down at the factory on the edge of town are a thing of the past, pretty much. That while some may stay at one place of employment for a long time, many are moving more frequently from job to job. Well, if you're in that place now looking for a new job, by necessity or by choice, well, we have some help for you today. Chuck Bentley, Chief Executive Officer of Crown Financial Ministries, is joining us. You might be familiar with Crown, a ministry founded by Larry Burkett. He's a graduate of Baylor University, the author of 4 books, including The Worst Financial Mistakes in the Bible and How You Can Avoid Them. He's also the founder and executive director of the Christian Economic Forum. Welcome to Weekend Connection, Chuck.
Well, Mike, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on with you, and I appreciate your ministry and the opportunity to work together today.
You know, for many of us, especially men, our identity seems to kind of revolve around our jobs. Is that a good thing?
No, it's not, Mike. And boy, you have really hit on the issue of why it causes so much stress for especially men to go through a job transition. I would rank it right up there with one of the most stressful life events that we can experience. When we lose our job, and especially when we feel like there's very limited prospects to get reemployed, we feel a tremendous blow to our identity. We feel a blow to just our self-worth when we lose a job. And if there was adverse circumstances surrounding that job loss, it makes it even more traumatic. And I think it's a lesson for us, as you pointed out, to be sure that we don't put our identity in what we do. So often we describe ourselves by our vocation. When someone's, right after you give your name, they'll say, tell me about yourself. You'll give your name, and then the next thing out of your mouth is usually what you do. We are children of God. It reminds me of a friend who was drafted in the NFL, and he met the chaplain in the workout room on his first day on the job, and the chaplain said, "Hi, who are you?" And he gave his name. He said, "I'm Todd. I'm the kicker." And he said, "No, Todd, that's what you do. Who are you?" And he said, oh, I know what you mean. He said, "I am a Green Bay Packer." He said, "No, that's who you kick for. Who are you, Todd?"
Mm-hmm.
And finally Todd realized, "Oh, I'm a child of God." And he said, "Yes, that's right. And you'll be that for eternity. You'll be a kicker in the NFL for a very short period of time." And that's really, really true. And that's the benefit of defining who we are by who God says we are, not where we work.
And I think it also can be frightening because it hits at this idea of security. Are we basing our security in what we're able to provide for the family, or ultimately in God providing for us?
That's exactly right. And the exciting part of when you do lose a job or you're in a transition, and you're looking to Him as your provider, that He is your Jehovah Jireh, He is the one who will be faithful to provide, then you can begin to see that God is in charge of this transition. We can look to Him to open up new doors and create an exciting chapter in your life. Yes, you'll feel financial pressure, and the more unprepared you are financially, the worse that pressure is going to be. But God knows the pressure you're under. He understands your circumstances, and He knows where He's going to lead you. And I've seen it time and time and time again where God takes what looked like a disaster, where He took a situation that looked like ashes, and He makes beauty out of it. And I've seen it in the job search process, Mike.
We're talking with Chuck Bentley, author and CEO of Crown Financial Ministries. Let's talk more specifically about finding a job. Has the process of finding a job changed over the years? Is it different now than it was, say, 20 years ago?
I think it's different, and yet it's the same. I'm going to give you a general answer to that. What's different is that with the online world, I think it's a little more difficult to get in front of people. there's a lot of barriers to get into see people. So, the application process is done online, and there's even robotic screeners looking for the right skill or talents before you get a call back. And all that can be really, really frustrating. But what's the same is most jobs are found through relationships. They're typically found by people who can get you in the door, who can get you the interview, can get you a reference that says, hey, I know Mike. I know he's a great guy. You ought to talk to him. And that will help you leapfrog over all the technology that stands between you and getting that opportunity. So it's different. The environment is different, but networking remains very, very critical.
All right. So someone has lost his job. Where do they start? Or even maybe we go back even a little before that. Should they immediately start in looking for a new one? Or is there a process maybe of self-evaluation first?
I think so. I mean, we wrote about this. I've done some radio programs about this. And it's really a time to seek God's direction for your life. The first thing is to say, Lord, this is an inflection point. This could be a really big inflection point. You may be directing me in places I never dreamed I would go. And I want you to be involved. I want to ask you to help me to find where you want me to be. And then I would follow some very specific steps. One is to identify your objective. What do you want to accomplish? And of course, we feel the pressure of how much I'm going to earn, but we really need to try to find a fit for where our gifts and talents fit in, even if it means taking less income for a season and having a place where you're really going to thrive. And if you would just start by listing, say, 5 companies that you think might be an ideal place for you to work, now you've got some focus, and you can begin working on how you're going to approach those companies, how you're going to get the opportunity to be interviewed. Of course, we need a resume. We need to have a way to make a very good first impression that communicates who you are and what you're capable of doing, so that when people are screening, they can see some of the highlights. And then you're going to need some really strong references, people that can be contacted that you know for sure are going to say good things about you. And then another step after that would be to begin networking, finding out who you know, who's inside those companies that maybe would give you an opportunity. In our case at Crown, we've been hiring recently, and a lot of the people we hire have come through church connections. People who have said to put on a prayer list, or somebody at their church has asked them if they were looking for a job or asked if they could pray for them, and those got referred over to us. And so God used the local church to make a really good connection for us and for the people that were in transition.
We're talking with Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown Financial Ministries. You mentioned the resume. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Sometimes I look at a resume or biographical information on somebody and think, technically this is true, but it seems exaggerated or overblown. How do you present yourself honestly and yet positively without, overstating what you've done and where you are in your occupation?
I think this is an area where absolute honesty is so important, because there is an era where people are inflating their skills and abilities. Some are even falsifying and fabricating that information. And if that happens, your integrity is completely ruined. And we're not going to hire anybody without integrity. But there also should be an attitude of humility, that you're not going to take all the credit for what you've accomplished. And I like to see that in a resume where people express things that have been accomplished. There's a certain level of being forthright and transparent, but they're not bragging about it, and they're saying it in a way that I sense there's deep character reflected in that resume.
How do you find a balance when you're looking for a job between desperation, I'll just take anything I can get, or being too picky? Because I think people can fall into either category. How do you find that balance where you think, well, this may not be my dream job, but I think it's the right job for now?
Well, if we think of an hourglass, and that hourglass represents how much money you have to continue your search, the lower amount of sand is in that hourglass, the more pressure you're going to feel to compromise and to just jump at something. So I think it's good to consider temporary employment. If you have a skill where you can do some consulting or contracting, I think both of those ideas are good. It takes some of the sting and the pressure off of it, where you don't get desperate and you don't make a bad decision and get involved in an organization or company where you don't really want to be and God didn't intend for you to be. So just what I call a stopgap measure. I've had to do that in my past. I've had some what I consider awful temporary jobs, but they were helpful in the sense that it gave me a little more time. There was more sand in my hourglass to be patient and to wait on the Lord and to find the right opportunity that was a good fit.
It seems that so many of us end up doing something different from what we studied in college. I remember hearing about somebody went to a business group, and the person asked, how many of you are doing what you studied in college? And there was like one person who was a lawyer, and everybody else they were doing something different. Why is it that so many times we study one thing, we put all that energy and all that money into it with the student loans or whatever it is, and yet we end up doing something different?
I think it's because very few people at a young age know who they are. They don't know their design. And I think that God built every one of us to operate within our design. I can think of my own case. I really didn't know how God had designed me and how he could use me. So imagine the simple, little saying that you don't put a square peg in a round hole. I think a lot of us go to school as square pegs, and we get out and we try to fit into this round hole. And I've seen it so many times because it takes some effort and some real discernment to know who God made you to be. But what I've seen on the flip side is when someone does operate within their design, it's a beautiful, beautiful picture of contentment and even far better results. When you look back through history read some of the jobs that maybe somebody once had. Larry Burkett developed a tool to help people know their design, and he said that's our first stewardship, to know how God gifted you, to know your talents, and then to go out and use those talents the way he designed you to use them.
Should we look at trying to find a job as being a job in itself with a regular daily schedule of searching?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at your need to find a job as your job, then you'll do much better at it, as opposed to looking at it like you're fishing, where you're just going to throw out a little bait and see who bites. If you set up a daily schedule and you're very rigorous at following a routine, you're probably going to do a whole lot better at making progress and coming across professionally to those who are trying to call you or set up appointments and to engage with you. So yes, that's a great idea, Mike.
We've been talking with Chuck Bentley of Crown Financial Ministries. Anything you'd like to add before we go about that job search?
Well, you started with the idea that there's a great deal of, I'd say, pressure, stress, and a sense of a blow to a man when he's going through a job change. And I've seen it. I've experienced it. I know exactly what you're talking about, Mike. And for anybody that's listening who maybe that's where they are right now, or they think it's coming in the near future, I would encourage you to look at it as an opportunity. When God called Abraham to leave his country and to go to an unknown place, it had to be very, very uncomfortable. But he did it by faith. And if you look at this as an opportunity of God to lead you to a new place by faith, I've seen God bless people through this transition. I've seen him do things they never dreamed were possible, where they end up in a place that only God could have orchestrated. It is a faith journey. It is a time for high trust. It is a time to ask God to intervene and to show you the way. And I hope today we've given you some practical steps, but more importantly, the encouragement to lean on God and to walk through it by faith. Don't let it overcome you. Don't let it destroy your confidence in him or feel like you've lost your identity in this world. God can restore anything you've lost and replace it with something better, and he will do that.
Chuck Bentley of Crown Financial Ministries. You can find out more at crown.org, crown.org, or the number is 800-722-1976. Chuck Bentley, thank you for sharing with us today.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure. I'm honored that you'd have me on the program.
Friend, join us again next week here at Weekend Connection.
Thank you for listening to this feature, a production of BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network. BBN provides 24-hour Christian programming, great Christian music, and Bible teaching. Listen to BBN by clicking the link in the description.